Greetings, humans! My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson, and this is The Smoke Show. On today's episode, we are focusing on my second favorite skills position in fantasy, the wide receivers. However, before we get into the fantasy fun, let's give those sponsors some love. The Smoke Show is a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group. If you have a need in sports, the Fantasy Points Media Group has a show that will cover you and then some. I'm going to rattle off some names and blow your minds here. All right, you ready? The TNFF Pod, Dynasty Vipers, Dynasty Happy Hour, Play to Win, Triple Play Fantasy, Campus to Canton, Injury Prone with Dr. Edwin Portes, Familia FFB, Early Tea Time, Final Points PGA, newest members, Sons of Dynasty, and of course, the Fantasy Points Podcast. Now that is a baker's dozen of quality shows to keep you entertained and your wallet fat. The Fantasy Points Media Group is brought to you by fantasypoints.com, where you can use the discount code SMOKEY22. Look, it's right at the bottom of the screen going over there. For the best price, the best site in sports. Period. Now, a couple little news items while we're on the theme of wide receivers here. Judy, one of a handful of wide receivers who got a major quarterback upgrade this offseason, was recently in some hot water. Long and the short was he was in a spat with the mother of his child where she wouldn't give him his phone back, so he locked the car seat and the formula in his car. At first blush, before all the particulars were known, it didn't look good, as the charges had a domestic violence enhancement attached. However, criminal defense attorney Drew Davenport states, because the mother stating at the bond hearing that she didn't want a protection order because she was not a favor of physical violence, no physical violence occurred in the situation, and she wants the charges thrown out, there is likely to be little to no punishment that Judy is going to incur. Personally, it just seems like the outcomes got a little out of hand, but it does raise a teeny tiny little red flag about off-field decision-making that will be in his notes. For fantasy, I was already a little bit lower on Judy than Sutton on his own team. This just adds another straw onto that side of the scales. In other wide receiver news, juice is loose! No, OJ Simpson is not. Jarvis Landry has finally escaped Cleveland and landed in his home state with the Saints, who now have a fairly formidable wide receiver core for quarterback Jameis Winston. That includes Landry, Michael Thomas, and new addition Chris Olave. Now, in Jameis's first 7 games last year, before he was injured, he was tied for QB 13 in fantasy points per game with one Mr. Tom Brady. Now, healthy again, with an upgraded supporting cast, I am in on Jameis this year. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterback values. And not really much else pertinent on the news front. So, let's break into the wide receivers. Smoke Show! Now, I'm not sure that there's another position group that's seen as much flux as the wide receivers this offseason, and we're going to get into that. The first question I wanted to ask the people was, which newly traded veteran wide receiver will have the better 2022 season? Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins or Devontae Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders? Here's what the people of Stacks had to say.
What's up, Stacks? What's up, Smokey? It's Mike with Nerd Sports. I'm with John and Mike. I'm going to say Devontae has a better season than Tyreek. I think about it this way. I think Tyreek's going to the Dolphins with Tua. And then we got Devontae, who's going to be with Derek Carr. Pair that up with Hunter Renfrow on the other side of the field. Yes, I know Jalen Waddle's there. I just think it's a better spot for Devontae to have a better year. 10's going to be missing 15.
I mean, it's easy to go with Devontae Adams. He already has chemistry with Derek Carr. They played in college together. Then you put in a quarterback situation. Derek Carr has had an MVP-like season, and he did well last year. Tua was still waiting on him. Miami does have a great offensive-mind head coach with a lot of weapons. New O-line, running game upgraded. I still put my money on Devontae Adams, though.
What up, Smoke? So I was just thinking about this literally earlier today, probably because I'm in the middle of a draft. So my thought is probably going to be Devontae Adams. I think Tyreek Hill is a fantastic wide receiver, and I even like Tua more than most people. But I think that connection with Carr and Devontae is going to prove to be superior to the Tyreek Hill and Tua connection. So,
Smoke Show! So it seems like the people offer a resounding verdict of Devontae being the favorite in this matchup of crafty veterans. For what it's worth, I completely agree. The AFC West is going to be so damn fun to watch this year. I'm going to have my eyes all over that. Now, with Tyreek moving on from Kansas City, it leaves quite the void in their lineup. So, I had to ask the Stack Streets who they thought the wide receiver to roster for the Chiefs would be this year.
Travis Kelce is a wide receiver. They just keep his price down with the tight end tag. Other than that, you have MVS, tall, fast trash. Mecole Hardman, fast trash. Juju Smith-Schuster, just trash. The guy I really want is the Western Michigan rookie, Skye Moore. Yes, he's overpriced. I still want him. He's next.
Josh Gordon. Flash.
Savior of the universe!
I actually trust Travis Kelce more than all of those receivers that you just mentioned. In fact, I actually wouldn't even touch any of those Chiefs receivers. I would just take Travis Kelce in the first round if I could. You know he's going to get peppered with targets, and Mahomes actually trusts him. It's actually more likely that Travis Kelce has like 1,800 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns than any of these receivers going over 1,200 yards. I don't trust Juju at all, and MVS is more of a deep threat and doesn't get enough volume.
Smoke Show! While I'm not going as far as the numbers Sauce Boss 22 is putting out there, again, I'm with the people on this one. It's Travis Kelce and then a bunch of wide receiver 2 and 3s. I will not have many shares of Kansas City players this year. Maybe some Rojo value picks, but that's about it. While it is nice to know about the known commodities in fantasy, it's that time of year where a lot of people are having their rookie drafts. Now, this is not the most spectacular draft class across the board, but one thing it does have is a lot of interesting wide receiver prospects. Now, to learn more about them, I've had a good friend of mine come on and get y'all up to speed. All right, we have probably the guy that has been on this show the most times in its existence. Our friend. I mean, we need a title that's above friend of the show because you will be on that now. You're like you got fucking shares in this ship at this point. But without further ado, my man, Coach Craig Sport. You can find him everywhere at that name. Coach, we're talking wide receivers today, and we're going to focus this conversation on the rookie wide receivers. Now, I want your thoughts within a 10-minute time frame because we could sit here and make fucking a series of episodes on these, but let's limit it to 10 minutes, baby. Give me your thoughts on the rookie wide receivers this year. This is kind of the position that has the most depth, we'll say, and anything worth talking about for this draft class. So I'm going to open up the floor to you, buddy. Give me your thoughts and perspective on this class.
Yep, you could argue it has the most value this year. We'll see how many of these guys actually end up turning out. I kind of said before the show that pretty much every one of these guys has something you could knock them for. So Garrett Wilson's like my number one. He was number one before the draft. Like my top 5 didn't change before the draft and after the draft at all, which is weird because usually it kind of changes a little bit. But Garrett Wilson's probably the safest. You know, there's question marks because he's a little bit smaller, but he's still bigger than a lot of guys that have succeeded at the NFL level too. So it's not a big deal there. There's Zach Wilson questions there. I personally believe in Zach Wilson still. They put a whole bunch of talent around him. They have a good offensive line if Mekhi Becton stays healthy. Yep. So it should be a pretty good offense. Garrett Wilson fits in that offense very nicely. He is the 1A, if you want to call Elijah Moore the 1B. I know a lot of people want to say Elijah Moore's above him, but he really isn't. Like that's a whole other story for a different day. So Garrett Wilson, he's, you know, you can't say too much bad about that dude. Overall, he was a guy that I really like coming out anyways. Drake London, obviously, is probably the guy that got the biggest bump from a lot of people just because he went to Atlanta. It's wide open field there. They did trade for Bryan Edwards now. Some people have concerns. Some people have concerns about Mariota and whatnot, but it's just like, okay, so Mariota, like he only throws the ball 8 yards anyways. and he's not that accurate. So like Drake London's probably the best wide receiver he could get because he'll go catch anything, and he wins it at the release off the line with his release. He wins at the top of the route. Like, it's a good wide receiver for Marcus Mariota. I don't think Mariota starts more than 8 games, then you get into Desmond Ridder territory, and it's pretty much the same guy anyway. So we'll see how that all shakes out. Treylin Burks, a lot of people really liked him before the draft. Some people have wide receiver number 1. He's still very, very raw. You know, he's replacing A.J. Brown. There's a great opportunity share there. He arguably gets the best quarterback of any of the top end, you know, way high end rookie wide receivers. At least that come into big target share right away. But it's still Ryan Tannehill, and they're still trying to kind of replace him within the next couple of years anyway. So you can't say too much about that. I think there are reasonable concerns there, how they're going to use him. I don't think it's going to be in a bad way, but, you know, he's probably better out of the slot. They drafted Kyle Phelps. This also plays out of the slot too. So, we'll see how this all shakes out. There is some concerns about his weight kind of fluctuating throughout college. He maybe wasn't in the best shape before the combine, tried to overcompensate for it, didn't test as well because of that. Then obviously we had him leave the other day because he had like a little bit of an asthma attack, which we know he has. So my concern is just with him. It's just like, does he ever develop into what people want him to be? I think he, at the end of the day, he's probably going to be what we hoped Laviska Shenault would be. He's not going to be Deebo Samuel. He's not going to be A.J. Brown. So he could just end up being what Laviska Shenault has become too. Like, that's a realistic possibility. He's probably a little bit more physical than Laviska though. And he doesn't really have the injury history that Laviska Shenault has, at least at the bright side. So, but he's also one bad offseason from ballooning up to a Calvin Benjamin too. So
any tight end vacancies around?
Hey, it could be in time. We'll just have to see how that all plays out. It's just the upside is there for sure, but the downside could be very bad. Jamison Williams, biggest thing about him is just that ACL, and then he really just produced 1 year at Alabama. Granted, it was at Alabama against the best competition you can pretty much go against. So I think he's a guy that goes into a good situation, though, in Detroit where he doesn't have to play a lot right away. Some people are kind of scared off by Jared Goff, but Jared Goff's probably not the quarterback past this year. Maybe. We'll see. But, like, Jared Goff's not the worst quarterback in the world. If he has a good offensive line, he can throw the ball down the field. So it's not going to be the end of the day for Jamison Williams. And then the fact that they have Josh Reynolds and DJ Chark there this year means they don't have to rush him back. So he should be able to get fully healthy before playing. Plus, Detroit, they're really not competing this year anyways. Not with that defense, at least. Skye Moore is my next guy. He just goes to the perfect opportunity. This is a guy that's still only 21 years young. He's only going to get better. Like, he was recruited as a 3-star cornerback, and I said this last night too. He had 4 scholarship offers, Western Michigan being the best one.
Where did you say that last night, Coach Craig?
On the Sons of Dynasty podcast that we did last night. So check that out over on YouTube at the Sons of Dynasty page there. But he's a 3-star cornerback coming out of high school. Goes to wide receiver. I assume he played a little bit wide receiver, at least in high school too. So he had 51 catches as a freshman when he wasn't a full-time wide receiver coming out of high school. So that's pretty good. He had 95 catches this past season. A lot of people didn't think he was going to declare. I think he's only going to get better. He had the largest hands at the combine, ran a 4.41, had the 99th percentile, 10-yard split on his 40-yard dash. So he's already a good, he's a pretty good route runner already. This is just a guy that's going to get better. And like I mentioned last night, Kansas City receiving room, there's nobody there. Like, Juju's on a 1-year deal. MVS signed a fake 3-year deal. They can cut him after next year, like literally, and save $7 million. McCall Hardman, we've seen what he isn't. They brought in Justin Ross, but it's not 2018. Josh Gordon's still there, but it's still not 2018.
You can go back even further on that one.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It sounds better when you put it that way. Yeah, Christian Watson's my next guy. I've been big on him since 2020 once everybody was started rumbling about Trey Lance. I started watching Trey Lance, and every big play there was to Christian Watson. Yeah, maybe he's a little bit raw. He came from FCS level, but, like, he's a unicorn. Like,
he's huge.
You don't see guys this big run this fast and have the cleaner elite package that he did have at the Senior Bowl. People knock in and be like, oh, the Senior Bowl's not that great. Oh, he also cooked 5 second-round corners too, so that's still something. Yeah, but tied to Aaron Rodgers, there's the whole narrative Aaron Rodgers doesn't like throwing to rookies or whatever, but hey, if he's the best guy there, he's the best guy there. So
that's exactly what I've been saying. It's like, who do you think he's going to throw to? The ghost of Randall Cobb? I mean, like,
that's the only guy he trusts there.
Fuck,
Uh,
man.
Yeah, but I think like early on in the year, it'd probably be Alan Lazard, it'd probably be Randall Cobb. Christian Watson with the capital that he got, he's going to be out on the field. Romeo Dubs is not good. Like, I know Beasley brought him
Reach
up
on it.
last night.
Reach on it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're taking him in the third round of rookie drafts, just don't. Like, that guy's going to be in Aaron Rodgers' doghouse like week one or like day one of training camp, probably. He's just not special. Like, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. Like, he won only on go routes pretty much in the Mountain West versus guys that were running like 4.7s. So cool. Has drops where it hit him in the chest a lot of times. Nothing after the catch. He doesn't play like he's 6'2", 200 pounds, and not in a good way. Like, he just plays small, goes down easy. Like, too many bad things there. Chris Olave, he's just kind of like that safe guy for me. It's just not that upside, but the fact is they brought in Jarvis Landry. Michael Thomas is supposedly coming back, but he's probably not there more than 1 year. Like, so he does have good opportunity long term, probably more so than this year, but I don't think he's ever going to be a 1. I think he's just going to be a good 2, which is kind of like guys we've seen in the past with Jerry Judy and Rashad Bateman, who I think are just number 2s at the NFL level. And people probably hate me just because I said Rashad Bateman there. But he's still not the number 1 target on this team. They still got Mark Andrews. He's the wide receiver 1. I don't care.
Yeah, there's no wide receiver 1 target opportunity in that system with Mark Andrews there. So you're getting wide receiver 2 target share.
Yeah. Jahan Dotson, he's a good player, but you're tied to Carson Wentz. He might be the number 2 target if you're lucky, but I mean, like his value just comes if Terry McLaurin doesn't sign an extension. That's pretty much it. End of the day. If that happens, then I think he has a lot of value, but who knows with Washington at this point. George Pickens is like, for me, you got the safe guys. So you got like the top 4 to 5 from Wilson to Skye Moore. And then you got the next bucket where you got the 2, in my opinion, you have Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson. They're kind of the safe guys, but they don't really offer as much upside. You got Christian Watson, George Pickens, which are kind of the guys that offer the upside, but you're kind of shooting a little bit too. Pickens, not a personal favorite of mine, but he's a weird pick because he's just very similar to Chase Claypool, but smaller and not as fast.
And less Canadian.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't go out to bars and punch guys though either, too. Even though he's got some off the field concerns of his own too. Like, he's a guy that could develop.
Us Canadians are not always just the peaceful motherfuckers you think we are. All right, so we're just out here breaking stigmas. All right, you can still trust Canadians, but
yep. So I think Pickens is a guy that could develop. Like, he's either going to be like develop into something good, or he's just going to be nothing. Like, that's pretty much, there's no in between there. Next guy down was David Bell. He went to the Browns. It's a good landing spot, and oddly enough, he replaces the guy that he's probably most comparable to in Jarvis Landry, because he's probably going to end up playing slot at the NFL level. Not a super quick guy, but very technically sound. He's going to be a decent player, but probably not like a big fantasy producer. Wendell Robinson's there. He was kind of surprised in the second round. I don't know what the heck they're going to do with him, but like, if you're drafting him in round 3, that's fine. John Metchi, like, I'm not as big on John Metchi as some people. I'm like, he's a very polarizing guy. Like, some people really like him, and some people really don't like him. I think he's going to end up being a slot for the Texans for a few years. I think he's going to be a guy that ends up being like a Jamison Crowder type of production where you can play him as a wide receiver 3, a flex play here and there. That's pretty much what he's going to be. There's good opportunity there, but who knows what Davis Mills is? Who knows what else is on the team long term? Taekwon Thornton was next. He was kind of a surprise in the second round, but he does have decent production at Baylor. The big stigma, as we kind of talked about last night too, is Baylor wide receivers and wide receivers Bill Belichick draft don't tend to work out unless their name is Julian Edelman or, like 1.5 years of Josh Gordon. So between those two, it's kind of hit or miss, but I mean, he's going a lot of times like in the third round, sometimes mid to the end of the third round. So that's worth taking a shot on a guy that ran, like a 4.26, 4.28, just depending on how you had it timed. He's not just a speed guy. He's actually been able to play some. So it's kind of like, okay, would you like, let's go back where John Ross was taken like first round and everybody's hyping him up. Okay, now take John Ross and put him in the third round. It doesn't look so bad when you draft him, even if he doesn't end up panning out.
True.
And there's probably not that big a difference between Taekwon Thornton and John Ross, if we're being completely honest in terms of college production. John Ross even had more injury history than that too, but different times. Alec Pierce for the Colts. I do like Alec Pierce. I don't like it's a decent landing spot. I don't like Matt Ryan though, and I don't think he can throw deep anymore. And that's kind of what Alec Pierce does best. So go routes and slant routes, and then you already got Michael Pittman running the slant routes and the drag routes and all that stuff. So it's kind of
But how long is Matt Ryan gonna be there? Honestly,
2 years probably, but so I wouldn't be surprised if Pierce pops in like year 3, but very underrated guy. Everybody was surprised when he ran fast at the combine. The dude was like an all-state track guy in high school too, so I wasn't shocked. And I knew he was fast anyways. Calvin Austin, he's another guy that went to the Steelers. He's a guy that I was surprised went in the 4th round in real life because like last year you had D. Eskridge and Tutu Atwell going to freaking 2nd round, and he's better than both those guys. So Calvin Austin was a guy that I really like. He's a guy that honestly I forgot about. Because like I remember watching like Memphis prospects a year ago, and I'm like, this other wide receiver, he's pretty good. And then I start watching him again. I'm like, wait, that was that guy. But he had back-to-back 1,000-yard years. He's going to be a very good punt return to start at least. So he's kind of the Ray McLeod replacement, but he offers more juice and more upside than that. And we even seen Ray McLeod be productive for a couple games last year. And if Deontay doesn't come back, if Chase Claypool runs out of good Canadian kindness, he might be gone too. It's just a very interesting situation there, but I think Calvin Austin's a guy that could succeed there. I think he could succeed anywhere, but that's a big different story. We get down to Velus Jones. He's kind of surprise pick for the Bears. I think he's more of a kick returner. He's a fast guy. He doesn't run the greatest routes. Some people will argue that, but he's already 25 or almost 25, one or the other.
I think it was his birthday the other day. Happy belated birthday, Velus.
But the Bears don't.
High school reunion.
Yeah, the Bears don't have anything in the wide receiver room besides Darnell Mooney. Really, I mean, there's Byron Pringle there, who I like. I love Daz Newsome, but the Bears don't for whatever reason. He'd be a really good slot player, and he was at North Carolina, but breaking his collarbone definitely set him back last year. Kyle Phelps, the next guy, that's slot wide receiver for Tennessee. Maybe this, if he was on the Patriots, or like, he could be the next Hunter Renfrow, Julian Edelman, that type of slot wide receiver. He's a guy that does some punt returning too as well. So he'll at least be active on game days. So if he gets his chance in Tennessee, it's just Treylin Burks. We have Robert Woods coming off an ACL, and then the other guys they have, they're not good. Like they have no investment in those other guys. I guess this was Patrick was a 4th round pick, but they didn't even keep him on the regular roster to start last year. So Danny Gray was an interesting pick by the 49ers, kind of a speed guy from SMU. Probably doesn't turn into anything at the NFL level, but if you're taking shots, in the end of the 3rd round, 4th round, something like that, you can do it, but I don't think he's going to do much. Khalil Shakur is like the other one that a lot of people like, mainly because he's tied to Josh Allen. If he ends up getting that slot role and turns into kind of Cole Beasley, he could be productive for fantasy. So that's kind of that guy when you're picking him in the 3rd round. Not too bad a value there. I might actually end up bumping him up just a little bit, but a lot of people are trying to say he's going to be a day 2 pick. I had him for 4th round. He ended up going to the 5th round. So oddly enough, the Bears did trade that pick away to grab him. Jalen Tolbert's I'm way lower on him than most people. I think a lot of people are just high on him because he went to the Cowboys. And they look at his raw numbers. If you're an analytics guy, you're going to love Jalen Tolbert just because he produced and had a big dominator rating. But he also played at South Alabama. And he also played against Sunbelt competition, and Sunbelt wide receivers rarely turn out at the NFL level. And the dude's already 23, still kind of on the raw side. We thought he was 6'3", 200 some pounds. He's actually 6'1", 194. So he's about Amon-Ra St. Brown size. But Amon-Ra St. Brown also produced at USC, and he could play a little bit of inside and outside there. And he produced alongside NFL competition in his own receiver room. And now we got Jalen Tolbert. He just produced big numbers there. I'm not even sure he's the best wide receiver in the Sun Belt, if I'm being completely honest. But he does, he just at that size, he's not really a guy that's good on the outside, not good on the inside. He's okay enough. He's a wide receiver 4 to me in my book. You can play him, but you don't want to have him on the field. It's kind of what I call the Tajay Sharp effect. He's good enough to be on the team. If you're a wide receiver 4, you're happy, but when he's on the field, you're not really happy about it. So no offense to Tajay Sharp.
Poor Tajay.
Hey, he just signed with the Bears too. They have a whole bunch of wide receiver 4s on their team.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
That's an
so
ugly fucking depth chart.
Jaylen Naylor was the next one up. He's kind of probably going to end up being a slot wide receiver at the NFL level. Vikings took him. He was out of Michigan State. His production was kind of limited just based on the offense that they had there. The quarterback play wasn't the best like 2 years ago. It was a little bit better with Peyton Thornton last year, but they also ran the ball a crap ton because they had Kenneth Walker. So he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he pops up, but you're probably grabbing him off of waivers anyway. Samori Toure, I talked a lot about last night on that podcast, so definitely go back and see that part. Went to Montana first, led the Big West in receiving yards, so that's obviously an FCS school. He had a playoff game where he had 303 receiving yards. I don't care what level you play at, that is flat out ridiculous. Like, and it's
That's all right, I guess. Yeah.
And again, it's the FCS level, but it's not like it was just some like really crap team at the FCS level. It was in the playoffs, so you're playing the best of the best at the at that division.
Level.
Yeah. So then he goes to Nebraska, transfers there. They had a wide receiver room that was kind of, it wasn't really crowded, but they just had a bunch of guys that transferred in, and they really had no idea what guy was going to play what role and all that type of stuff at the beginning of the year. Plus, Scott Frost is an idiot. Talked a lot about this last night. He got fired because of it. He's not a smart guy, but he had almost 900 receiving yards. And his two best games were against his two toughest competition in Ohio State, who he almost had 2 touchdowns against. He had one long one where he just outran the whole Ohio State defense, kind of like Treylin Burks did versus Alabama. But nobody talks about this because it's Samori Toure, and he's at Nebraska, and he just turned 24. So that's like the big knock on him, is he's kind of old already. But he goes to the Packers, wide open receiver room. I don't think he's any worse than Romeo Doubs, and he's a guy that could fit their offense very well. And if he gains the trust of Aaron Rodgers, that's all it takes. And in my opinion, like, he's kind of like a Brandon Ayuk who's had some success in this offense before, a similar type of offense. But obviously not quite Brandon Ayuk level. But and then that other game that he had was against Wisconsin, where he had 7 catches for 113 yards, and Wisconsin was the top ranked defense in college football last year. Granted, they only play in the Big Ten, and there's not high-scoring games there, but they still were the best by the stats. Bo Melton's kind of the next guy out of Rutgers. He had some hype from the Senior Bowl, from the Combine, maybe a vertical slot guy. Maybe does some, maybe doesn't. He's probably just a waiver wire guy, too. Let's see. There is 3 guys left. So, well, and then there's Justin Ross, but I ain't talking about that. Eric, I can't even pronounce his last name. Higgins, the Texas Tech guy that went to Miami.
No, please, by all means, do attempt this.
As a Kanama, we'll go with that. Sure. But he's kind of the different guy in that Miami receiving room. He's a little bit bigger. Obviously, still at Preston Williams, but apparently the new coaching staff probably doesn't like him if they're drafting this guy in the 4th round. Probably doesn't ever do anything there, if we're being completely honest, but who knows? All the other wide receivers they got are tiny because it's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Cedric Wilson. They're all just kind of slot guys, so maybe he gets a role at some point in time. Michael Woods was the other one. I liked him a lot when he played at Arkansas. He had a really, really good year when Felipe Franks was there, and he was playing alongside Treylin Burks. He bets on himself, transfers to Oklahoma. Ends up being like the wide receiver 4 there and limited production, even though they did a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. But, he just kind of got buried. There's a lot of talent that was there this year, whether it was I can't even remember everybody. Mario Williams, the Hazelwood, and then the other guy, the good guy. I can't even think of his name right now. It's gonna bug me now. Marvin Mims, that's who it is. But he's kind of the different one because all those guys are a little bit small. I guess Hazelwood's not small, but he lost all his athleticism when he had his ACL. So Michael Woods was kind of the bigger wide receiver there. But he is actually really good deep ball receiver and tracking deep balls down the field. And if you watch the Combine at all, there's like the one Malik Willis throw that everybody tried to hype up and whatnot. Yeah, it's because he made a great adjustment. Like, he literally sat there, waited on the ball, and then adjusted to it, like over 4 yards, and caught the ball. Like, he made it look good, but nobody talks about him. But, a 6th-round draft capital is better than I thought he'd get, so maybe he turns into something there. Obviously, we've seen them hit on late-round wide receivers and like Donovan Peoples-Jones. Obviously, he's not that type of athlete, but he's a decent player. Don't sleep on him. And then Romeo Doubs is the last one. I just don't even want to talk about it. Like, I already talked about him a little bit. I'm like, yeah, if you're an analytics guy, you love this guy. But like, some people are like, oh, he'll be the guy in Green Bay because he had better stats or better raw stats than Christian Watson or whatever. Well, Christian Watson's receiving stats accounted for 35.3% of his team's receiving yards because they only had 2,200 passing yards. And Carson Strong
for like pie right there.
Carson Strong threw for like 4,100, and Romeo Doubs just had just over 1,000. So he only accounted for like 25% of his team's receiving yards. So when you look at it at that scale, and then you factor in North Dakota State is the Alabama of the FCS, and they run the ball 62% of the time. They blow out a lot of the teams they play, and he wasn't playing the fourth quarter. Kind of like when T. Higgins came out, he kind of had the knock on him because of some of the numbers. But Clemson was beating people so bad he wasn't even playing the fourth quarter. But that's pretty much the main ones there. I mean, there's some UDFAs that are probably going to be interesting, but they're all just waiver wire guys. Justin Ross is there if you really want to take that chance. But like, I think there's a 20% chance he even ever does anything at the NFL level. Obviously, if all these teams passed on him, then they didn't really trust the medicals, and he does have that degenerative condition with his back. It's not just the thing that he had surgery on, it's something that popped up at the combine as well. He ran a 4.68. Granted, he was coming back from a foot ankle injury and only had a couple weeks to train, but he had the bottom 1% 10-yard split of all, or going back since 1987. So he's in the bottom 1% of that for 10-yard split. That's not something you want out of your wide receiver. And like, he's just, last year he just couldn't separate either. And like, I get DJU sucked, but like he couldn't get open on his own either. So.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen within a month's span. But yeah, I think we went the full fucking yard. That was a good 10 minutes, Coach. I thank you very much for that. Don't look at that timer. Don't look at that timer up top.
We doubled
it. You nailed it. You nailed it. I want to thank you so much for coming on again. You are always a pleasure to have on here, and I always walk away knowing a fuckload more than I did before, which is what I hope to give to all of you watching this. Just knowledge from him to you through me.
Hey, we did 26 wide receivers in less than 23 minutes. So
not bad. I'll fucking take it. All right. Stay tuned to the next segment, Coach. Love you, baby. And there you have it. Some 2022 offseason thoughts on wide receivers and assortment of interesting perspectives from the people, delivered to you as always by The Smoke Show. If you're listening on Spotify, please take the half second to leave a 5-star rating, as they are new to Spotify and I want all the stars like Mario 64. Use the other half second from earlier and hit the subscribe button on the way out. I greatly appreciate it. As always, this podcast is proudly presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. What more can I say about them? It's a collection of the most knowledgeable and profitable minds in the industry. You like money? You like fantasy points? You want to #score more? Then what are you waiting for? From statistical analysis to DFS betting knowledge in both the NFL and now the PGA, to the hottest new prospects coming out of the college ranks, the Fantasy Points Media Group has a show that will cover your needs and more. And for those looking for the full meal deal, remember, go to fantasypoints.com and use the discount code SMOKEY22 for the best price to the best site in sports. Period. And there you have it. I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking it out to the end. Before we sign off, I'd like to give a shout out to the following people who contributed their stories for today's pod. On Stacks, you'll find today's contributors: The Avenge Nerd, Javar in Session, Nate FFL, Bo McBigtime, Hoove, and the Sauce Boss 22. You are all fucking badass in my books and friends of the Smoke Show. And thank you, big thank you to Coach Craig coming on for that interview and get you all caught up in the rookie wide receivers. If you wouldn't mind, shoot us a follow on Twitter at @the_smoke_show. And you can follow me at SmokeyHellNFL on Twitter, the Stacks app, and now on TikTok. Yeah, I caved in. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet, but it's probably going to be fucking stupid. Incentive. My name is Josh Smokey Hell Nelson. All I've got left to say is, where there's smoke, there's fire.